Portrait of East Germany tonight. The flight to the west is unending and now concerns there may be too many refugees. In this country, a spotlight investigation into abuses in the asbestos business. And a New York doctor who had an assembly line business for Medicaid patients.
NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Nothing the communist leaders of East Germany can do or say will stop the freedom movement in their country. Tonight again, more than 500,000 East Germans in the streets of a half-dozen cities demanding change. A historic time. NBC's Mike Betcher.
The night was cold and wet, but East Germans spoke out again by the hundreds of thousands. In Leipzig, they were not pacified by the communist leadership's offer to allow 30 days travel to the west each year. They issued a two-word response: leaders resign. The answer was the same in Dresden and Halle and in most every other major city in East Germany. In East Berlin, government opponents have gained new confidence after Saturday's anti-government march attended by 500,000 people. Not half measures as demanded now. Any citizen has the right to travel to any land for as long as he wants, complained one speaker. The audience openly agreed.
What would have been a giant concession 1 month ago appears as a small one now. These people want more than permission to travel 30 days abroad. They want to be able to decide for themselves how long they can travel in the West.
The party's television station broadcast interviews with people in the street who said the government offer wasn't enough. It's the biggest piece of junk I've ever heard, said one woman. If they're going to let us travel, it's 365 days a year or nothing. East German leader Egon Krenz, in office less than 3 weeks, is lagging far behind his people's demands.
Egon Krenz is not the Mikhail Gorbachev of East Germany. He's more like the Konstantin Chernenko of East Germany, a transitional leader driving the Communist Party of East Germany off a cliff.
Again tonight, the people of East Germany snatched back the banner of reform, just as Egon Krenz thought he had captured it. Mike Betcher, NBC News, East Berlin.
Meanwhile, the rush to the west continues. West German officials, concerned their country will be overrun by refugees, today urged East Germany to adopt free elections and other reforms that will keep East Germans home. NBC's Dennis Murphy tells us tonight that West Germany is like the host of a party that threatens to turn nasty.
They just walked across like Americans visiting Canada. No drawn guns, no snarling dogs, no dash for the border. Thousands of East Germans quietly abandoning their country. 200 cars an hour crossed from Czechoslovakia into West Germany. Tonight, the official East German news agency acknowledged that more than 23,000 of its citizens had left since Saturday. At the emergency shelters like this military barracks, the refugees are finding that the euphoria is gone. West Germans have seen all this before, and the burden of welfare, housing, and employment is crashing home. Marina Kiesler heard on TV the Czech border was open. We looked at each other, she says. We dropped everything and just went. Before the Kieslers were the thousands who sneaked past the barbed wire border from Hungary into Austria. Then came the Czech wave, trains with thousands of East Germans headed west. Since January, 180,000 refugees have entered West Germany. More than a third of them are still unemployed.
These people.
West German leaders are getting nervous.
Everything above 500,000 would be very heavy to accept, but it's impossible to refuse.
Refugee children need new schools. The families need an estimated $5 billion of new housing stock. It is as though the Berlin Wall ceased to exist. It's an open border, at least for now. There was a time when the reunification of the two Germanys sounded like a fuzzy debate for the next century. But tonight, like a sudden storm, the problems of a united Germany are already raging. Dennis Murphy, NBC News, Frankfurt.
Other changes in East Europe tonight. Poland's Communist Party says that next year it will abandon its traditional Marxist-Leninist dogmas, become a Western-style socialist party. Similar changes were announced last month by the Communist Party of Hungary. In this hemisphere in Nicaragua, a change of attitude. The Contra said today that they will meet at the United Nations on Thursday and Friday with representatives of the Sandinista government. Those will be the first direct talks between the two sides in more than a year now. Also coming up here tonight on NBC Nightly News, the man in the middle of what could be a huge political scandal. National drive to reform what too often is a crime. College hazing that starts as fun and ends. Charles Keating is at the center of a scandal involving the $2 billion collapse of Lincoln Savings and Loan in California today. Keating won a 2-week delay of his appearance before the House Banking Committee. When that hearing into fraud does begin, some of the biggest reputations in Washington may be on the line. More now from NBC's Andrea Mitchell.
Former Lincoln Savings and Loan operator Charles Keating had so much clout that 5 U.S. senators tried to get federal regulators off his back. All of them had received contributions from Keating or his associates. DeConcini and McCain of Arizona, Glenn of Ohio, Regal of Michigan, and Cranston of California said they were simply representing a constituent who is having trouble with overzealous regulators. At recent hearings, regulators said they had never experienced anything like their summons to Capitol Hill in April of 1987.
I think that this meeting is an example of some extraordinary political influence, the likes of which I'd never seen in my career.
The regulators were so astonished, one of them took notes. DeConcini complained that the government's appraisals of Lincoln's real estate were grossly unfair. Glenn wanted the investigation wrapped up, saying, to be blunt, you should charge them or get off their backs. If things are bad there, get to them. Why is the exam dragged on and on? Regal, where's the smoking gun? Where are the losses? DeConcini again, what's wrong with this if they're willing to clean up their act? Bank examiner Michael Patriarca, you can ask any banker you know about these practices. They violate the law and regulations and common sense. Another regulator, this is a ticking time bomb. And Glenn did say, I'm not trying to get anyone off. If there's wrongdoing, I'm on your side. Finally, the bank examiner revealed to the senators that the Justice Department had been asked to open a criminal investigation into Keating and his S&L. At that point, most of the senators began backing off. DeConcini has told the Senate Ethics Committee the senators were doing nothing more than official duties. This confidential staff memo prepared for shows that he was briefed on all of Keating's demands before the meeting. Common Cause says it's the kind of power only...
We're not dealing with the normal constituent service case at all. We're dealing with the campaign.
Regulators say the taxpayers could have saved more than $1 billion if the senators had not intervened, as DeConcini was still making calls on Keating's behalf. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News at the Capitol.
Also in the Capitol, Marion Barry, who's the mayor of Washington, D.C., again tonight has some tough questions to answer. Charles Lewis, a longtime acquaintance of the mayor and a former city employee, courtroom today, that he sold the mayor cocaine on more than one occasion. Tonight on Spotlight, our nightly news series of investigative reports, the asbestos rackets. Asbestos fibers in the air are killers. That's why that asbestos be removed from public buildings. Ironically, those laws have also helped create a new kind of scam that is endangering the lives of workers. NBC's Brian Ross is here with more on all of that tonight. Brian?
Tom, removing dangerous asbestos is now a billion-dollar business, but a 6-month investigation by NBC News has found this business can be a racket, exploiting illegal foreign workers who have come to America for a better life.
Friday night at Gloria's Bar in Brooklyn, a gathering place for Polish workers new to this country. It's payday, and after a long, hard week, there's plenty of vodka and beer all around. A lot of these men from small towns and farms in Poland have been in America only a few months, almost all of them illegally. But already, they are making what is for them big money. But their America is a cruel America, and their big money is blood money. Every morning before dawn, illegal Polish workers gather up on street corners and buy crew bosses who will pay them $10 an hour to do jobs that could put their health, asbestos jobs, ripping out cancer-causing asbestos from buildings. Federal authorities say what's going on here is a nasty labor racket. And the victims are people in no position to complain, like the dozen or so illegal Polish workers moved around from one asbestos job site to another. paid about a third of what union places, schools, apartment houses, demolition sites that investigators say are often asbestos death traps. In a basement of a Manhattan apartment building, Ross himself pointed out crumbling asbestos insulation around, and the dangerous asbestos fibers are in the air.
Is it dangerous?
Yes, it's very dangerous.
What's is that asbestos fibers, seen here under a high-powered microscope, are so tiny, 1/100th the width of a human hair, and so easily inhaled that 1 out of 4 asbestos workers who work unprotected, as this man did, gets cancer, or none of the Polish workers wore breathing masks or protective clothing. The next day, the crew boss had the Polish workers all put on special suits and breathing masks as required by law off the basement steam pipes. But there were some Poles with their masks off. Some did not wear protective rips in their safety suits. There are laws against all this, but for this country, thousands of illegal workers from Poland are being put to work every day in jobs that could kill them. And right now, for $10 an hour, American contractors can have their pick of workers from Poland.
I've had lawyers, I've had doctors, I've got engineers, and I can't believe they're doing this work, but they are.
It's a deplorable situation.
Ray Maria is the acting inspector general at the Department of Labor, which has been investigating racketeering in the asbestos removal business.
In the area of asbestos removal, today we're not talking about a dangerous workplace. I think we're talking about a deadly workplace.
To keep the racket going, there are ads in Polish newspapers in this country and Poland for asbestos workers. And once here, the Poles are at the mercy of fly-by-night labor brokers and crew bosses who arrange phony asbestos work licenses and send them into the worst kind of work conditions.
I have 221 Polish people.
This asbestos labor broker, Daniel Mikosz, a Pole himself, says the men who work for him are so desperate they'll take any job.
Does it make you sad that some of your countrymen are doing this just because they're so desperate for money?
Yes, partly yes, but it's reality.
And it's reality not only in New York. In Detroit, a crew of Polish asbestos workers caught by immigration officials who found the men were all illegals sent out to Detroit by a crew boss in Brooklyn.
Nobody had masks.
In San Antonio, this man was one of more than 150 drifters, illegal aliens, and construction workers used to remove asbestos at a big hotel. And in San Francisco, the Tenderloin District, the Skid Row here, alcoholics and the homeless were taken off the streets and put into asbestos jobs by a big construction company.
So we were standing on the corner drinking, and he pulled up in the truck and asked us if we want to work.
Did he tell you it was asbestos?
Not until after we got in the truck.
And how much did he tell you he was going to pay you?
$10 an hour.
And you said that's pretty good money for...
Oh, yeah. When you're homeless, damn good.
Since 1950 in this country, more than 500,000 found asbestos unprotected, just as many of these men do every day for $10 an hour.
The reason this racket thrives is that the victims won't know they're sick from asbestos until 15 or 20 years from now, when they develop cancer or one of the other fatal diseases caused by asbestos. Tom?
Brian, what about the danger to the general public as a result of this situation, or is it confined only to the workers?
No, often the workers are not well trained and they do a poor job of removing the asbestos. And once the asbestos is removed, it's often dumped illegally and dangerously. And we'll have more on that tomorrow night.
All right, thanks very much, Brian Ross. The U.S. Supreme Court today cleared the way for the last legal obstacle to a settlement of that claim against the A.H. Robbins Drug Company. Those claims, you'll remember, are for injuries caused by the Dalton Shield birth control device. Under the settlement, almost 100,000 women in this country will share more than $2 billion altogether. The lawyer for the USS Iowa sailor Kendall Truitt says an insurance company now has agreed to pay him $100,000 as the beneficiary of a policy on the life of former crewmate Clayton Hartwig. Navy investigators say Hartwig probably caused the Iowa gun turret explosion that killed him and 46 other sailors.